Hello, it's Miss Beauty here, and today we are continuing to look at our topic of measure, and we are specifically looking at length today. So remember, length is measuring from one side to the other, it's looking at distance, and we are focusing on again millimeters, centimeters, but I'm also going to introduce to you meters and kilometers because it's important to know these two units of length as well. So our learning intention is to understand the 4 units of length, to estimate distance or length in kilometres, and to be able to convert between different lengths. So I'm going to give you quite a lot of information, so you can pause the video at any time, you can rewind it if you want to get a better understanding of something, or if you feel like you're understanding it really quickly, then you can skip forward to the parts you need or skip back. So before I show you some examples, I just want to explain to you about the metric system. In the UK, we use the metric system to understand measurements. Now, what is this? Because it's quite confusing and you don't need to be able to explain what it is. It's just, it's a good idea to know. Now, the metric system is a system of measurement that uses things like the meter, okay, to measure things like length and distance. We've got litre that you might have heard of, and millilitres, okay, that would be to measure things like volume or density, okay, measuring liquids, maybe when you're baking or want to measure out how much water you would like to drink. You might have a 1 litre water bottle. We also work with grams and kilograms when we're weighing out perhaps some flour for a cake, or we want to weigh out how much rice we are going to cook with. And these are just basic units of length, which we're looking at today, which is also to do with our distance. Things like capacity, which is also known as volume, and weight, which is also known as mass. And weight we know links in with grams and kilograms, and this is a good diagram to look at, okay? So I hope that makes sense. That is what we use in the UK. Okay, and across the world there's different systems of measurements that people use, okay, depending on the country or the continent, but we are using the metric system. So there are 4 main units of length that we want to look at today that are used in the metric system, and the metric system we're looking at is the meter. And if you look at millimeter, which we've looked at yesterday, the centimeter and kilometer, they've all got meter at the end. You could say kilometer, but it's easier just to say kilometer. And I've written down the unit of measurement underneath each of these measurements. The millimeter that we looked at yesterday, the millimeter, they are used to measure small objects, very small objects. The smaller lines on a ruler indicate our millimeters. So here's 0 on our example, and here is 1. Now this is equal to 1 centimeter, but each of these lines here are worth a millimeter. That's 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. So this is the same as saying 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters, 7 millimeters, 8 millimeters, 9 millimeters, 10. And it's definitely going to be 10 millimeters because we know that 10 millimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. So 0.1, okay, is the same as 1 millimeter. 0.2 is the same as 2 millimeter, and so on. 4, this is 4 centimeters, okay, 4 centimeters and 1 millimeter, so 4.1 millimeter. 4.2, 4 centimeters and 2 millimeters. So I hope that makes sense. The centimeter, now the centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. So there are 100 centimeters equal to 1 meter. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. The centimeter is usually used to measure things that are way too big to be measured in millimeters, but also far too small to be measured in meters. Okay, 1 centimeter is close to, now this is just an estimate, a centimeter is close to the length of a fingernail, so it's a good way to picture that in your head. And height is another sort of common measurement that we would look at in centimeters. Okay. So that is what the centimeter is, and it's good to understand that. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. The meter, okay, and we use the little m as the sign to show our measurement in meters. A meter is a common unit of length. It is about the distance from the ground to the door handle in your house. So where my little pen is, from the ground to a door handle, that is about 1 meter. But that is, of course, just a rough estimate. But it's good to be able to picture these things in your head. You might have seen me in class using a meter stick before. That is equal to 1 meter. And obviously, it's been in the news an awful lot, and we've seen it in Newsround, okay? The 2 meter distancing rule. So you might know that social distancing, you have to maintain a 2 meter distance at all times. That's more gauged towards adults, but that is good to get an idea of what that might look like. So 1 meter is a meter stick. If you put two of those together, you would have 2 meters. Okay, so I hope that helps you sort of understand it in a real life example or a real life context. The kilometer, which is abbreviated or short for km, the kilometer is a common unit of measurement used to measure longer distances. So 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. 1 kilometer is about the distance of walking 3 times around a football pitch, like this. So it's for measuring longer distances. Now, if you were asked to estimate a kilometer, it's basically asking you to guess the distance traveled or guess how far you are going to maybe travel. So maybe I've booked a holiday, a city break to go from Edinburgh to London on an aeroplane. So I need to make my way to the airport. Okay. Now I need to guess how far it takes the airplane to get from Edinburgh to London in kilometres. So I want you to have a little think before I reveal the answer. Okay. And I also want to figure out, is it going to be quicker for me to drive there instead? Okay, what do I think? So from Edinburgh to London in an aeroplane is about 534 kilometres. Okay, and from Edinburgh to London in a car, it is about 659 kilometres. So you can see it would take much longer to get from Edinburgh to London in a car, in our electric car, because obviously we want it to be economical. So 534 kilometres in an airplane and 659 kilometres in a car. So we would know it would take much longer to travel in a car. And that's to be expected because obviously we know an airplane is much faster than a car. Now, looking back at converting our measurements, we know that 1 centimetre is equal to 10 millimetres. So to convert centimetres into millimetres, we need to multiply the number we are working with by 10. And we know that by multiplying by 10, you can either add a 0, okay, or you can move a decimal point to the right by 1 space, or forward to the right 1 space. So you might not need to watch this, so you can skip forward, but this is just a recap of yesterday just to help you with the task today. So I know that 6 centimetres must be equal to 60 millimetres because 6 times 10 is 60, or if I just add a 0 to the 6, it becomes 60 millimetres. If you see something written like 11 centimetres and 9 millimetres, it is the same as saying 11.9, because if you picture on a ruler, okay, if you picture on a ruler 11 centimetres and you count along 9 little lines, remember those lines are worth a millimetre, so 11.9. And to figure out what this would be in millimetres, you need to multiply 11.9 by 10. And we know that if we are multiplying a number that has a decimal point in it by 10, we are moving the decimal point forward to the right by 1 space. So my answer becomes 109. You could say 119.0, but that's just the same as saying 119 millimeters. So that's what you do when you see measurements written out like that. Again, if you're given a measurement that's straight up in decimals, 8.7 centimeters, again, if you times it by 10, You just need to move that decimal point forward to the right one space, so it becomes 87 millimeters, or 87.0 millimeters, but they are the same thing. So I hope that makes sense. Remember, to change anything from millimeters into centimeters, to convert them, so to convert millimeters into centimeters, you're to divide by 10. So 70 millimeters into centimeters, you need to divide 70 by 10. And remember, if you're dividing anything by 10, you are taking the 0 away if the number has a 0 in it, or you're moving your decimal point back to the left by one space. So 70 millimeters divided by 10. Well, I know 70's got a 0 in it, so it's just going to be 7 centimeters. And I also know how many times does 10 go into 70? The answer would be 7. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. It can be a little bit tricky to understand, but just remember that rule. So 70 millimeters equals 7 centimeters. What happens if I have 4,000 millimeters? Again, if I'm dividing 4,000 by 10, I'm just knocking a 0 off, okay? Or I just move that decimal point back. So the answer becomes 400 centimeters. And if I do, how many times does 10 go into 4,000? The answer would be 400, because 400 times 10 would be 4,000. So 4,000 millimeters becomes 400 centimeters. If you're given, again, a number with the decimal point and you're asked to change the millimeters into centimeters, you just have to do 8.7 divided by 10. And we know that our decimal point, because we're dividing, has to move back to the left by one space. And we have to put 0 in as our placeholder. So 8.7 millimeters becomes 0.87 centimeters. So I hope that makes sense. Now, this is new information that we are going to get today, or we're being given today. We know that 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters. Now, to convert meters into centimeters, you need to multiply by 100. Now, we were multiplying and dividing by 10, but because we are working with 100 centimeters, we need to multiply by 100. To multiply a number by 100, you add 2 zeros to a number, or you move your decimal point forward to the right by 2 places. So 5 meters we want to change into centimeters. So all you need to do to convert the meters into centimeters is 5 times 100. 5 times 100, all we need to do is add 2 zeros onto the end of it. So 5 meters becomes 500 centimeters. Okay, again, you could, if there was an invisible decimal point, you would move it 2 spaces to the right and put zeros in as the placeholders, so it would still become 500 centimeters. What happens if the question asks you for a quarter of a meter? Well, if we know a meter is equal to 100 centimeters, okay, all you're being asked to do is find a quarter of 100. And because we've looked at fractions and percentages, we know that a quarter of 100, how many 4s go on to 100? It would be 25. Because 25 add 25 add 25 add 25 is 100. So a quarter of a meter is the same as saying 25 centimeters. So I hope that makes sense. If you see 4 meters and 80 centimeters, again, it's the same as saying 4.8. You could put it as 4.80, okay? 4.80. And then I need to convert this into centimeters. So I need to multiply 4.8 by 100. So if I move my decimal point forward to the right by 2 places, 1, 2, my decimal point ends up here, I have 480 centimeters. So I hope that makes sense. Again, if you have a decimal number here like this, you're multiplying 7.05 meters and changing it into centimeters. To multiply this by 100, you move the decimal point forward 2 places to the right, 1, 2. So 7.05 meters becomes 705. Oops, it's quite difficult to write that in there. 705 centimeters. If you were being asked to change centimeters into meters, you are dividing by 100. So if you're dividing by 100, you're either taking away 2 zeros or you're moving your decimal point backwards to the left by 2 spaces. Okay, so we'll look at a couple of examples. To convert 800 centimeters into meters, remember we need to do 800 divided by 100. And because there's 2 zeros, or we're working with zeros in this number, we can just knock them off. So we know that 800 centimeters is equal to 8 meters. Okay? If we have 840 centimeters, then I know that there is 1 zero there, so I can take that away, but actually it's much easier to just move that decimal point to the left by 2 spaces. So 840 divided by 100. Let's move our decimal point. 1, 2, put it in here. So my answer becomes 8.4 meters. So 840 centimeters is equal to 8.4 meters. Again, 70 centimeters. We were only working with 1 zero, so it's easier to move our decimal point backwards to the left by 2 places or 2 spaces. 1, 2. So 70 centimeters becomes 0.7 meters. Now I hope that makes sense. We just remember, if you're converting centimeters back into meters, you're dividing by 100. Now, if you would like to challenge yourself to do the extra task, which is changing kilometers into meters, then you can continue watching this little part of the video. We know that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. It's very good to know that. To convert kilometers into meters, we need to multiply by 1,000. Now, it's very similar to 10 and 100, rather than adding maybe 1 zero or 2 zeros if we're working with 100. But we're working with 1,000, so we would need to add 3 zeros to a number. Or if the number has a decimal point in it, we would have to move that decimal point forward 3 spaces to the right. So 4 kilometers is the same as 4 times 1,000. And I know by adding 3 zeros to my 4, I will get the answer in meters. 4,000 meters is the same as 4 kilometers. 4.345 meters. Let's change that into kilometers. Okay. Let me see. Oops, sorry, change that. That should be kilometers there. So 4.34, turning it into meters. It is, let's move our decimal point to the right by 3 spaces. Okay, so it is going to become 4,345 meters. Okay, do we see how I've done that? Because I've moved my decimal point forward to the right 3 spaces. So 4.345 kilometers becomes 4,345 meters. That's if you're changing kilometers into meters. If you're working with meters and you're wanting to change them back into kilometers, we divide by 1,000. So if the number has 3 zeros in it, you can take the 3 zeros off, or you're moving the decimal point backwards to 3 spaces. So 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. 3,000 meters in kilometers is the same as saying 3,000 divided by 1,000. And again, you can just knock the 3 zeros off. So 3,000 meters becomes 3 kilometers. If we had a number like this, 3,750 meters, and we wanted to change that into kilometers, again, we are just moving that decimal point that would start here backwards to the left by 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. So the answer would become 3.75 kilometers. 3.75 kilometers. So that's how you change kilometers into meters and meters back into kilometers by multiplying by 1,000 or dividing by 1,000. It might sound a little bit confusing and it is tricky, but you can pause the video at any point just to make sure that you understand what you're doing. And you can maybe have the video alongside your worksheet that you choose to complete. I do hope it helps. There's quite a lot of information to get through, but like I said, you can pause or you can rewind the video at any point. Try your best and remember to ask for help if you need it. Thank you.